In this video, I'm going to be discussing the Easy Green Screen 8 user interface, and this is just a brief overview to compare the version 8 user interface versus version 7. So this video is not a tutorial, it's more meant for people who already have an understanding of Easy Green Screen 7. So the first thing to point out is installing Easy Green Screen 8 is not going to remove Easy Green Screen 7. I made this a separate plugin identification number in Photoshop. And I did that intentionally because I'm using brand new features in Photoshop that I know the engineers are probably still tweaking a little bit. So I don't want to risk having something break in a Photoshop update with version 8 and users not having version 7 to fall back on already installed. So for the foreseeable future, these are going to be separate plugins. Version 8 will require Photoshop version 24.7 or higher. Now in the plugins menu, the one that says Easy Green Screen without a number, that's Easy Green Screen 7. The one that says 8 is obviously 8. And with version 8, you've actually got two panels. You've got the main extraction panel, and then you've got the touch-up editing helper, which you're not going to do extractions with. This is just meant to speed up your workflow for when you need to touch up images after you've extracted them. I've got a whole video dedicated to this, so I'm not going to discuss this in the video right now. So I'm now going to just highlight the main differences between these two for what you'll see in the user interface. In the first one is the add or remove presets. I've added this to version 8, which didn't exist in version 7. And when you click to add or remove a preset, you can save a preset with a new name. And then it's going to store that here. And so it will save all these settings. So you can create your own custom presets, and then you could use those to batch with if you needed to as well. The next thing is the auto refine hair, which is off by default on version 7. You won't have this checkbox. Instead, you'll have a drop down with several options. The one that's default is auto, edges only, and that is the equivalent mode, more or less equivalent to the auto refine hair in version 7. And then there's several options, but some of those are dual mask. I'm not going to get into what dual mask does in this video, but if you remember from version 6, the old dual mask method, I've reintroduced that into version 8, but with several different dual mask options. And I really like the way that came out. I've got a whole video dedicated just to that. With the 3 checkboxes here for the screen max shadow removal, max foreground retention, and pause for levels adjustment, these are no longer there. I've replaced those with HSB limits, which is how I've always wanted to make the plugin, but I've never been able to until this latest Photoshop release. So I'm pretty excited about this. This gives the user much more control over the range of color that's being extracted, much more so than in version 7. And so this replaces these 3. And with that said, I will point out that version 8 is about 20% slower on average in my testing than version 7. And that is because of this change I made. Although I feel the change is warranted because of the extra control it gives the users. And version 8 is not necessarily slow. It's still about 25% faster in my testing than the old version 6 running on the same computer. So this Easy Green Screen 8 kind of falls halfway in between versions 6 and 7 for speed, but most users it's maybe a 1-second difference. And I'm not going to really dive into all the technical details of why, but just know that it is that was necessary to create this. So moving on here, the last thing that we have that's really different is the in the batch processing, there is this checkbox to run an action on extracted image. This will allow the user to run custom actions after the extraction has been made to do any automated custom editing to the image. And this is useful for a lot of things, but one thing in particular I've got a tutorial and some actions released for this that can run the old version 6 style auto clear that I know a lot of people like. So while I did not build that directly into version 8 because the old style of auto clear can have issues erasing sports equipment like bats and balls and that sort of thing, that's why I changed the way it worked. But for people who want to use that in some cases, you can do that with an action now. And it's really very simple, actually. So I'm just going to now do an extraction because I do want to highlight a couple differences in version 7 and 8. And this is a good image to show that. With these HSB limits, if these seem a little bit overwhelming to you and you're not sure how to adjust these, usually you can just leave these at default and your extractions will look pretty close to what they look like in version 7, with a couple of exceptions, which I'm going to hit remove screen on version 7 and show you, and then compare that to version 8 and show you the cases where these will be different. So in version 7, you can see that it removed both of these shadows as well as almost removed that green floor. And if I go back and extract this in version 8, in version 8, the shadow is not completely removed and much less of this floor is removed. And that's not because version 7 is better than version 8. That is because I made this specifically by design to do that. And to further elaborate on this, is there are times where you have dark clothing that gets green spill and becomes a dark green, similar colors to the shadows. And version 7 has a terrible time with removing areas of your foreground when it gets spill on it, as well as it can over remove things that are not chroma green, either due to spill or due to other colors that are not quite chroma green. So I feel too aggressive to remove parts of your foreground at times you don't want. But I know people are going to have images with these dark shadows in particular where they're going to remove those and see those are not removed. Well, Easy Green Screen, it's very simple. I created a threshold for the minimum brightness of your screen that it's allowed to remove. So if you have dark shadows, you can usually just lower this, and those shadows will be removed. So Easy Green Screen has the same abilities as 7 and actually more. This can remove darker shadows than version 7 can. You can go all the way down to 1% brightness, which is essentially black. So version 8 can actually remove much darker shadows than version 7 can, but you have to change your setting. And that's why I give users full control of these settings. But because the users now have full control, I didn't want to set the defaults of being over aggressive. And if you run into situations where you have shadows that are not being removed, I recommend actually correcting your lighting so that way you don't have shadows that are that dark. And that is because dark shadows are going to eliminate your ability to have control over this setting to where you can force it to not erase parts of your foreground that have spill on it. So yes, you can remove dark shadows in Easy Green Screen 8. It's very simple by lowering this number. However, I recommend, like I say, not having them. That way these adjustments can be used to correct for other problem issues in your image. Now I've got videos that discuss this in more detail. And the other thing is with this floor, when you saw that not being all the way removed, there's actually, if we sample this, you can see this is not really a chroma green. This is more of like a yellowish green. 120 hue is green, 60 is yellow, and some of these are coming in the 80s for the hue, low 90s, high 80s. So there's actually adjustments on this threshold for the hue you could adjust to erase more of that if you wanted. I'm not going to do that for this demonstration, but just know that version 8 can remove everything version 7 can and more in most cases. It's just that the default settings are not catered to doing that. I've tried to optimize these settings a little bit better So anyways, hope that makes sense. Thanks for watching, and make sure to watch the rest of the videos.